Welcome, everybody, to another episode of You Only Go Once, also known as Yogo. I am here tonight with my amazing friend and co-host, Cheryl Catafio. I'm Eileen Grimes, and we have an amazing guest tonight. I cannot wait. Cheryl, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Let me introduce Katina Corrao. She's an actress, comedian, and writer. The New York Times calls Katina a staple in the New York comedy scene. Her first comedy album, Hot Date, debuted at #1 on the iTunes comedy chart. She's most proud of her pandemic passion projects, creating the Audition series with her sister and publishing her first children's book titled Katina Von Silly. Katina, welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I love it. It's one of those things. So full disclosure, Katina and I went to college together. That's how we know one another.
Okay, I was going to ask this before we started. Yeah, we'll get into it. I'm sure.
We went to the same college in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, and Katina has just gone on to do just so many just fantastic things. If you have not listened to her comedy album Hot Date, I highly encourage you to do it because it's both sweet and hilarious and also truly like a picture of what it's like to be in the world in your adult female world, because there's a lot of things where you're just like, yeah, that's it. Most recently, Katina has created a web series with her sister that we talked about in her intro called The Auditions. Katina, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it's a riot, and I would love to hear all the background on it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that really sweet introduction. I'm so appreciative. Yeah. So the audition came out of the pandemic. My sister and I lived together for 15 years and never really created anything, even though we're both like creative in our own ways, never created anything together. And it was just one of those things where we were like, what can we do? We have all this time. And I always love the idea of calling out the craziness of auditioning, the craziness just kind of this business, and how you feel, and how like it's certainly exaggerated a little bit, but also not, like, because that's really how I feel at times at an audition. And it's really how I feel like the casting director to me is always like, you're so intimidated and you're saying all the wrong things and you're flubbing and you always seem green, even if you've been in the business for years. And highlighting that was just so funny to me, because I feel like it's relatable to every actor. And then when people were non-actors that were also kind of enjoying it, that really made it so much fun for us. So so it really just came out of like, what can we talk about that's so funny and so ridiculous, and let's just put it out there.
Yeah, and they're so good.
Oh my thank you so much. Thank you.
I mean, we were talking about a couple before we jumped on together to record, but I remember there was one, I think earlier, that was like, you had to be turned around and talking the whole time.
Yeah. And that's so funny, because really a lot of them are pulled from reality. And I remember being in an audition once. It was for a musical. It was for like a children's musical touring company. And, you think like children's theater, like they're going to be so sweet. And it was like, oh my God, and I remember I had to turn around. They were like, can you face the wall? And half the time I would come away from these auditions, like, and then I would think years later, I'm like, were they making fun of me? Like, it took me 10 years to wonder.
Oh my goodness.
And I would say that, and again, this is just my perspective, but whether you're a seasoned performer or you're just starting out, I feel like there's always that anxiety when you're being looked at for a certain role, sometimes a ridiculous role. You know what I mean? Like, please blow your nose 3 times. We want to see if you're right for a Kleenex commercial. Like, it's just so funny to me.
Yeah. And even as a non-actor, right, to be able to see that and there's just that vulnerability that you have to have in coming into those, and we, whether it's an interview or a blind date or whatever, like there's when I watch those, at least I still get that sort of like, oh, I know that feeling.
Yes. Oh, well, that's so great to hear. And, I've always been a big fan of calling out that feeling. I'm definitely okay with not being the cool, like who's got it all together. And, I think like it's natural just to feel like that in those situations. So calling it out is exciting for me because it's like you're calling it out and you're just getting it out there. But then also, like you said, other people can relate regardless of the situation that they're in.
Oh, yeah. There's one episode, I don't know what it was a recent one, and you had to say, like, I'm a mom. And, Krista is on the other side going, are you? Are you, mom? And I thought, oh my God, I feel so attacked for her. Yeah, it was, but yet like the two of you, your chemistry, I mean, your sisters obviously, but the chemistry is brilliant. And I love that the two of you play. Like, it's fun to watch the play, right?
Thank you.
It's just, yeah.
And that is so funny. And so my sister, I mean, both of our personalities are a little exaggerated in that, but it really is how our dynamic is. And when we first, when I first, was doing stand up and Krista would come to see some of the shows, she would be in the audience and really give her real reactions to some of the comedians, like she would be like, and I'm like, you can't do that. Like, everybody's great. Everybody's great. She's like, but they're not. I'm like, all right, it doesn't matter. You just gotta. So now she'll come see a show and she's like this the whole time.
Oh my goodness.
Katina, I vaguely remember this. Is it true, like for auditions regardless, would you bring cookies with you?
Yes. And I did do an episode that touched on that a little bit, but if I have time to tell you this.
Yeah, please tell.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. Yep.
I would just, I don't know. I would bring cookies to the auditions and, it was like fine. And then for some reason I had an audition with an agent. So it was different because it was more of a meeting than it was an audition. And I brought cookies, and I have no idea why I did this, but I brought them on like a nice plate.
I remember this
so
one.
after I brought the cookies and he was like, okay, like, all right, it didn't really go very well. I like knocked on his door again. I was like, I am so sorry, but can I have the plate back? Like, I don't know why I gave you the plate. And it was this whole thing. And then that night, I went to see one of my friends who was in a play. And I kid you not, the guy, his girlfriend was also in the play. And I was sitting right behind him. Like, I came into the play and I was like, there he is. And I'm sure he thought that he's like, I gave you your dish. What do you want from me?
Excuse me.
Yes, right.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I just love that though. I know, remember
like,
seeing that and just what a great thing.
Yeah. Like, and I'm sure everyone's going to be like, you know what? I wasn't going to give her the job, but then she brought me cookies. So.
What's the edge? Yep. Yeah. What's the edge? The edge is biscotti. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
So Katina, did you know, when the two of you met and stuff like that, did you know you wanted to be performing and be a comedian, or how did that sort of come about?
No, that's such a great question, because I actually never intended to be a stand-up. I never really, that wasn't ever really my dream to perform stand-up. I always knew that I loved to perform, and I definitely credit Neil Newman, who was the theater director at Cabrini at the time. He was just in it. Like, he was in theater talk. He encouraged me to go to ACT, which is a school in San Francisco, the theater school. He really knew his stuff, where I was like watching 90210, like I didn't really know that world. So I always knew that I wanted to perform. And then it wasn't until I got to New York and I started doing improv that I realized a great way to get up on stage every night and to sort of hone your craft was to start performing stand up. And a lot of my friends were performing. So that's kind of how it happened.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it is, I in a weird way though, you have to do it, or at least I felt like I had to do it on my own terms because
Sure.
I didn't necessarily feel like I fit into, like when I went to a comedy club, I wasn't like, oh, I'm home. Like I was intimidated. I was nervous. I was doing different material, but yeah.
I mean, look, you see, I've watched documentaries on like, the stigma that's there, and, it is no small feat. And I'm going to divert for a second, Eileen, and then I'll come back to what we're doing.
That's fine.
Wrap
it around.
I really loved your children's book because it touched on that, right? So Eileen, I think I got to get this for your daughter because I think that your daughter and your son, because it just talks about why can't I be me? And this is, just because I am one way or the other doesn't mean I can't be funny or I can't be anything else. And it's a wonderful story. I often wondered because you have been the epitome of optimism. Like I've never seen you with like a face or anything like that. I mean, at college, clearly, like even when you're talking about the auditions, again, no small feat. And all the intimidation, and yet you walk away and you're like, it was a good experience. Like it's, you walked away from that. I often wondered how you continued that longevity of optimism.
Well, thank you.
Any
That's
secrets?
Great. Yeah.
Any secrets with this? Because
and it's so awesome because like I actually never get upset about things. Just getting like when I log off, I'm like, oh, why? Like, what am I doing? No. But I will say that it's a great question because I think you do have to be positive. You do have to be authentic, and you do have to have the confidence to bring what you feel like your strengths are to the table. I think if you're not optimistic or if you're not positive for a lot of the time, you want to be realistic, like I feel like there's that difference. Like you do want to be realistic, but it is also so there's really no rhyme or reason at times for certain things. So, you're at this audition and like I said, you're there for a Kleenex commercial and someone else had a better sneeze than you did. And it's frustrating and it's hard, but you do have to say, well, at least I'm getting called in for commercials. Like, even if it's the bare minimum, you have to kind of draw that positiveness. I mean, that doesn't mean that there aren't times where you're like, oh, I should have become a dentist or whatever, should have done something else.
Sure.
But I credit my parents for that because my parents are very, very early on in my career were very much like enjoy the journey. And it's like, okay, well, like I'm enjoying this journey, but like, and you're always, but you are finding value in that journey, whether it's, getting to know who you are better, even if it's just that, or I don't know what I'm trying to say. I hope that's making sense, but it's really just about if you're authentic and the more you do it too, the more you come to discover who you are as a performer. And what you can bring to the table. And then in a way you get really comfortable with it so that it does become like, okay, I just wasn't right versus they hate me. I'm a terrible actor. I shouldn't be doing this. It's like you're able to have a little more confidence and say, okay, this wasn't right for me. And then when you see the commercial and you're like, yeah, I wasn't right for that. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, but that's so difficult, that vulnerability of, I don't know. I feel like it happens fast track for right? For anyone that's in the acting space, because, if I'm applying for a job, I'm like, okay, well, this one period of time, I was sending out my resumes, like I didn't get picked for these things, but now I have this and I'm good to go for a while. Versus in acting, I feel like this happens a lot. And you're like,
yeah.
you get turned down for stuff. And like to be able to continue to be resilient through that and vulnerable enough to be able to actually keep going is amazing. And like, how do you keep going?
Thank you. I mean, I do think that, I mean, there's so many different feelings that you go through. Sometimes you think like, well, when things are going really well, it's easy to sit back and be like, well, you just have to be positive. When you have something going, it's like, well, I like to tell people just keep doing what you have to do. But in the reality, when it is just door closing, I think that's when it's so hard, but you do have to dig down and just say, like, what am I bringing to the table? And what am I doing that's going to set me apart? Why am I doing this? I mean, I was doing stand-up for a long time. I still perform stand-up, but for me, it was like I was honing a craft and learning every day about who I really was as a performer. I'm sorry, I just keep going on these tangents, but I think fine. You just have to make that decision. Like, am I going to make it work for me? That's the other thing, like kind of keeping your head down and saying like, let me worry about me, because it's so easy every day. You're on social media and you're like, oh, that person booked this and that person's working on this project and that person is working on this. And you can try, that's the hard thing, you can try and be your best every day and people will still say, no, you're not right for this. So what do? Well, you try to be unconventional and you try to create your own opportunities. And and maybe that helped a little bit with the idea for the auditions, because it was like, now that everything's shut down, right? We're not doing any commercials. What do I feel showcases me in the best light, that I have the most fun, that I can be the most authentic? So it was like, the pandemic forced a lot of people to create their own opportunities. And then I think when that goes a little bit well, then that's like the ultimate feeling of excitement, because you're like, this isn't something that was like I auditioned for and then I got it and I booked it. This is an unconventional way of getting my work out there. So that I guess keeps you going a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
And there's no I remember saying this years ago, there's no roadmap, right? Like, if you want to become a lawyer, you're going to law school and you're doing this and you're doing that. Not that that's not incredibly difficult and has its own challenges. It's just that, like, if you want to become an actor, it's like, what? There's so many things to do. So, and knowing that your path is going to be completely different from someone else. And I think the only way to accept that is to really fully embrace who you are. And then one last thing I'll say is that you don't really know who you are until you get all that rejection and realize how resilient you are. So it all kind of comes full circle. So now it's 10:30. No, I'm just kidding. I feel like I just talked for so
long. Me too. Just kidding. I know. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. And this is why that children's book makes sense, right? The accepting of loving who you are. And, it's something that I talk about sort of on some other work that I do. And it really is like, I want to help raise my kids into being the best versions of themselves, because that they will stand apart because they are themselves, right? We all have something different and special to offer if we can really be self-reflective enough and intentional enough with the gifts that we have and the experiences that we've had in life. No one else is going to have those. So
that's right.
there is something special that can be brought because of that. And that book makes complete sense as to your journey too.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, as an example, like being booked at a comedy club, and a lot of shows in New York are all over. Like you have your clubs, but then you also have shows that are maybe, at different venues, theaters or whatever. This one I remember was at a comedy club, and I was terrified because I thought, I'm not really that edgy, and maybe I have to be edgy, and maybe I have to be hard or whatever, and I remember I had like a dress on or whatever. And it was like I had no choice but to be myself.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard a comedian who had performed, who I was very intimidated by, like, it was when they laughed, it was like, oh my God, they laughed because I was me and I wasn't pretending to be this edgy comedian that was talking about, So that was a good feeling.
Yeah, that's great. And I've I haven't seen you in person in a long time, but I have watched your career over the socials. You just put yourself fully out there, but it's fully you. I remember, and I feel like you've embraced, you talked earlier about like finding the thing and embracing it. And I feel like web series really have been like part of your like success story, right? You did a web series where you played a mom of like a bajillion kids.
Oh, Kid Farm. Yes,
Kid
it was
Farm.
called Kid Farm.
Oh my God. How I laughed. I mean, so Katina's there and she's like all the kids on Kid Farm. And it's a really interesting social commentary because there's a husband and you find out in one of the episodes that you're like a math genius.
Right.
And he's like, no, you don't know math. And you're like, okay. And it's just, there's just these great, like social commentary. Yes, dear. It's one of these great, it's some of these great social commentary moments that I think you're really good at, just the observation of life, right? It's just in general of that. And of course, let's face it, reality TV is like just a fodder of,
I know.
Yeah, I know. It is a fodder of information. It just is like
really
of opportunity.
Is. Thank you. And I will say about that is that I have been incredibly blessed to have been surrounded or put together, however it works, with people who are incredibly talented to have created certain web series too that I was very lucky to be a part of. And it's like when you're around people who are like Michael Cyril Crichton is an actor. He's on Only Murders in the Building now, and he's an incredible actor and just a wonderful person, one of my dear friends. He did a web series called Jack in a Box, where he played he was like a ticket holder, and I played his coworker. And it was like, I felt like, oh my God, he had this incredible talent 10 years ago. And it's like, you're working with these people who are now like building these unbelievable, incredible careers. So I feel very lucky to have been surrounded by people like that too. Like for some reason, I felt like my group, my improv and stand-up group, like everybody was like really focused on working and sharing and writing things for each other. And that only comes, in my opinion, like when Michael, because Michael is so confident and such a great actor, I think, and my friend Becky also wrote a web series and had me in it. When you write for other people, it's like the ultimate sharing and collaborating, and you can, I feel like you only do that when you're really sure of who you are as an actor too. You're not keeping other people away. So
yeah, I mean, I've heard that from follow some comedians and things like that.
Sure.
I think one of the things that I've heard is that the craft keeps getting better if you actually work together and not against each other, right? And there's just something amazing that really happens if you're intentional about the other people that become a part of this. And it's actually harder if you're trying to be like the shining star within all of that,
That's right.
So I mean, that's like a whole life metaphor, really.
No, you're so right. And that's why I always say I feel like everybody should take an improv class, regardless of what you do, because that is always just about creating a scene with a group of people versus getting on stage and doing I mean, stand-up is awesome too. I don't mean to knock stand-up. It has its own wonderful things. But when you're in an improv group, I mean, this is just like 6 people on stage and you're creating and you're yes-anding each other and it's like, it is a great metaphor for life.
Yeah. I've thought about taking an improv class just because I just think it'd be terrifying and fun and interesting more than anything.
So
no,
I did.
And you did?
I did many years ago. I did.
Tell us.
Somebody invited me. It was somewhere in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, and I walked in, and it was like a hot summer night, and the place wasn't air conditioned. We were all trying to improv, and one of the things they did is they made you like shove marshmallows in your mouth, and you kind of had to act out something. And I was like, "This is great. I'm acting. That's good." And I think I had to do something where I forget what it was. Like I had to become a boxer or something like that. That was the only thing I could think of because of the, obviously
mouth guard.
The mouth guard, but also like the Rocky connection where he's like, "Put me in." So it was just, but meanwhile it was like disgusting. So literally like I'm gagging on marshmallows and I'm like, this is fun.
Right.
Wow. But it was a fun experience. And especially around, I think many of us have learned a lot from improv, especially you just mentioned something about the yes and it definitely builds a more positive mindset. I lived a lot of like, yeah, but so
right, we all do. Yeah,
that's nice. Yeah, but now watching other people embrace the yes and it's been really a helpful skill. So I thought it was great, big fun, other than it was sweltering hot and I had like marshmallows just melting and gagging me. But I have been a very frustrated actor. I mean, even at Cabrini, like I was the stage manager, like I was always behind the scenes and all the good things and things like that. Even though I wasn't even really a stage manager, I think they honestly, like I was an accounting major and they took pity on me and they're like, just manage this piece of it. Sounds good.
You're organized. Do it.
Put me in. Yeah, put me in. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of yours is because I'm like, you did it. Like you actually did your thing.
Thank you.
And again, we have other friends too. Like we have a friend, Courtney O'Connor. She's the artistic director. Yeah. She's the artistic. She is. She's the artistic director now for the Lyric in Boston. Like she's doing her thing. So we just get to see like all these people just rise and just do their thing. Looking back on that now, like you've established your career and your star is continuing to shine. If you had to ask your younger, or if you had to give advice to your younger self or other younger people just getting into this, what advice would you give them?
That's such a great question. Honestly, aside from no one knows what they're doing, like really in the grand scheme of things.
Sure.
And I think I would say don't be fearful. Just really do what you want to do. And I was thinking, I'm trying to say this as eloquently as possible and it's not happening. But when you are at an interview or whatever, and again, this is going back to like what I do at the auditions, like just because they're the casting or the agent or the thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's this high status, low status thing. Like they want you to win too. They want to support you. They're doing a job, but you're doing a job. So it's that old story of like when someone says they're looking for a painter and some guy comes to his house and he's like, oh, and he's fumbling with his, paintbrushes. It's like, well, you don't want that guy. You want the guy that's going to come in, do their stuff, be great, and you work together. So really just like go and do it. Like Nike, I think they had something that said just do it.
Something around that.
Yeah.
It's such good advice too. I mean, at any point in your life, because there's always new challenges. There's always new things to think about that we don't even know now. And to just sometimes just jump in.
Yeah.
And go,
And again, like bringing up the pandemic, not to harp on that, but I do feel like that was a time for many people where it was reflective and you just were able to sit back and say, like, what am I doing with my life? What do I want to do? And now that I don't have the opportunity to do it the way that I thought I was supposed to do it, then like, how can I make a change? Like, kind of like getting out of that rut of like, it's day to day to day. Every day can be different. You can call up somebody that you haven't talked to in a million years and your whole life can change. So it's like, if you approach every day like that, it's,
exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Soul, the cartoon?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Tina Fey, anyway. So there's this point that it's like new souls trying to have to get trained to get into the world, right? And there's this one point where these guys like try to wake people up. And so there's just like this guy working in IT and he's, or finance or whatever, right? And so like they find him and like he wakes up and then he's just like, holy shit, like obviously he didn't say that in a kid's, kid's movie, but it was like, I'm alive. Like, what am I doing here? Like, throws everything out. But I feel like that happened, like that kind of thing happened for so many people. And we're seeing that in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
With people leaving workforces and things like that, and actually pursuing passions that they've had and just haven't been able to do or hadn't taken the time to do. And I mean, I think it's a gift that we have people refocusing on some of that stuff.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like just this different outlook on life and it's sad that it took that.
Yeah, for sure.
For that to happen. But people are just going in all different directions now. People are just quitting their job left and right.
Yes. That is correct.
That is correct. Yes.
But oh man, it's so funny. So, having gone through this, well, first of all, I always really wish Cheryl had been a comedian or in improv or do something. 'Cause I think she's hilarious. So I'm just saying that now, putting it out there, but people get to see that now with the podcast and things we're doing. So I think that's sort of amazing that
it's so true, Eileen. And I think that's such a great lesson too. It's like, you didn't know that you were going to have this podcast and it's like your star is continuing as well in places that you didn't know. And it's like, I agree. I think you continue doing it and you're so funny and fun and kind and, you just keep going.
Oh, shucks.
Exactly. Thank you.
Well, that's my time.
Yes,
thank you so much. No, I'm kidding.
And
I'll pay you later.
Compliment. You both compliment each other so nicely.
We have such a good
so beautiful.
time on this. And thank you for acknowledging that, because we just have a good time together, and this extends our zaniness, from the day to day. At some point we're going to have to do like either, I don't know, like a series where all you see is like our rando texts, which would be just So at some point, not now. We love this.
It.
Oh my goodness.
We might get fired from our day jobs.
We don't. Maybe too soon.
So with that, obviously going back to one of the questions that we have, or that you had checked off, was, there's, when we get here in our lives, there are people that have meant the world to us and either have supported us or maybe even not, but they impacted us in one way or another. Is there anyone out there that you would love to thank just for being where you are now?
Again, I'll go back to my parents who always supported me, my sister and my husband now. My husband's now joined that in like that complete trust in ability and my creativity and whatever I want to do, they're on board with. That being said, and this is, I'm saying this in the kindest way possible, but I had a manager who was tough, was like very tough on me. And I was very green when I first moved to the city. I still am, and I've been here for so long, but just like not knowing what I was going to do. And I always felt like I could never, it was like I could never make it work in that person's eyes. Like I could never just do enough, but because of that, it just motivated me. It was like, it wasn't an easy yes with that person. It wasn't like, you're awesome. It was like, you have to work at this. You have to keep working. And even though it was a struggle, and I was like, God, why can't this person just submit me for things, and they have the power to do this and they don't. And it's like, I do want to thank them, because whether they knew it or not, I realized in myself, boy, this is something you really do want, because despite all of this, you're still doing this. It was like, you weren't a comedian. Okay, then I became a comedian. You have to write a show. Okay, great. I write a show. It was like I was doing all those things without even realizing it. And then I looked back on that and I was like, wow, I don't know what, thank God it wasn't handed to me. God knows where I'd be right now.
Right.
You know, but
Oh,
I think we need to be grateful for the rejection, for all of the rejection, because it pushes you, and it's hard, but then you realize, even if it's years later, like, oh, that was cool, because that came out of that, and I never thought that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ugh. Here's to rejection.
Hooray. I have a good
goodness.
friend, John Friedman, who is so smart, and he created something called the Rejection Show. And it was the show that, and I remember the big show was always on Valentine's Day. I loved doing that show because it was always about like failed love or failed relationships. And you would read your rejections, whether they were like SNL sketches that didn't get, you know, award jokes or whatever, rejection letters. And it was such a beautiful celebration. So
I love it.
It was great. So he has a book too, the rejection book. So you should definitely check that out.
Oh yeah.
I'll check that out. That's great. That's wonderful. Katina, one of the things that we talk about on this podcast is it's something that Eileen has coined. It's literally her trademark. It's something called, well, this is happening. And so just, you know, we talked about the text a little bit earlier. Eileen, it's generally like 10 p.m. texts. And I know it's coming. Like it's 7 p.m. her time. So she's fresh. 10 o'clock, I'm kind of like starting to get a little like, and then she's like, hear me out. And that's, you know, that's the first thing. Hear me out. What if we do da 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 da? And that's how this podcast happened. Right. And then there was no stopping it. Right. It was, this is happening. What's the next thing for you? So what is this is happening thing that's happening?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I always said that I really just want to keep working on acting and really kind of honing my craft that way. So I think even though I'm still doing stand-up and I still love stand-up, I think I would love to just, with these auditions, it's really allowed me to get into character, and I love doing that. So my focus maybe is a little more acting, but really just to continue working. I think no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing voiceovers or anything, just to keep going, because I hope that in 10 years I can come to you and be like, wow, I didn't see that coming, but that's, I'm still in it, and I'm just in it in a different capacity.
Ooh, how does how does one get into voiceover work? I've always found this very fascinating and interesting. I'd love to hear more.
Oh, it's awesome. And voiceovers kind of work hand in hand with commercials. So when you sign with a commercial agent, then you would have your voiceover agent generally within the same space. And it's great because a lot of them now are done from home. So you're recording them, and whether it's a cartoon or a commercial, or sometimes in that case, you really do have to throw your acting into the ring, because it's like, if you're reading for insurance, it's going to sound very different from a bear in a children's book, but
or maybe not.
But I always tell people, if you want to start in commercials, just make a little demo reel and just do 4 or 5 different reads, and they don't have to be completely different, or they can be, they don't have to be. And then just get yourself out there, because there's so much work for voiceovers. Eileen, I don't know. You're gonna have to make it real. Maybe that's what's happening.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to my son, and he was like, I was explaining how actors make money, and he was like, wait, like they do that and then they get paid? Or like, especially in cartoons and stuff, because we love, Lego Movie and all these kind of things. And he's like, well, so he's like practicing voices and stuff, which is actually so sweet.
That is the best. And I think, in the right, when they really do want to do it, I think it's to encourage them. Why not? They get to be creative.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually, as Cheryl knows, I'm all like, oh, you want to be creative? You want to be an artist? Like, let's be an artist. I want you to do all these things. Like, right. Maybe that comes in from working in corporate America for long enough. Like, no, be a creative. It's way better.
It is.
I just, want to encourage that, because my mom's a musician also. And there's something so beautiful that we miss in traditional schooling and things like that is so incredibly important to humanity, and being able to experience art together. Whether you're the artist or the one experiencing it, like, it's such an essential piece of society and who we are as humans. So I'm like, yes, you can be the artist. Do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I even think back to when I was a kid and my mom would take us to the library, and they had the woman who was reading the book, and I remember she was always like so expressive, and I was like, that's a cool job, So like any kind of theater, or Cheryl, I don't know if you remember, like the Valley Forge Music Fair. My mom used to take us to see those little plays. And so, I feel like that is so exciting for children, because it really gives you that perspective of like, wow, people do that. That's so cool.
I think I might overdo it, because there's part of me that I'm like, well, okay, that's a job. That's a job.
Right.
Yeah. Job.
Right. He's like, I don't know.
Fishermen, they have a job.
Yeah. Right. I love it.
Goodness.
Opposite end of the spectrum on that one.
Yeah. So Katina, where can people find you? So give up.
Yeah.
Throw it all out there. Okay. Like, let's celebrate at the end of this. Like, throw it all out there. Where can people find you?
I love it. And I've never talked for 2 hours before, so I want to thank you. No. Definitely. I would love for people to go to the Instagram. So if you go to katinacorrao.com, you'll see the auditions, and that goes directly to the Instagram. And I would love for you to watch them there, and just to get reacquainted with all the episodes, and let us know if you want to see anything special. We have about 10 more episodes that we're releasing before we do another season. So we're just going to keep doing them and have fun. And then as far as stand-up, I have a couple of fun shows coming, and I'm hopefully going to record another album soon. So I'm going to definitely work on that. And then Katina Von Silly, which is Barnes & Noble or Amazon or on Book Baby. Yeah.
Love it. It.
I am so grateful. Thank you so much for having me and for chatting. I mean, anytime somebody wants to call me up and talk, please.
Yeah. I'm so glad we got to do this. It's so good to see you. Like,
it's so great to see you
in person-ish. Yeah. So Yeah, I know.